Hey everyone, here we are to continue learning about pawn structures. We already talked about isolated pawns, passed pawns, and in this lesson we're going to talk about doubled pawns. These parts, I know they're not as exciting as learning tactics or playing games, but you really need to understand these concepts. If you want to move forward and become a better player, this is a mandatory foundation that you have to have. So please pay attention. If you need to go over it again, do it, and you're going to see as we move on in this course that you will be using, and we're going to be making reference to these concepts. And as you already saw in the lessons about the passed pawn and the isolated pawns, these little things could make a huge difference and could of course help you win your game. So let's get started. Double tap pawns are going to be pawns of the same team who are on the same file. And let me show you what I mean. If we take a look at the Spanish opening that we already learned in this course, it goes e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop b5. So this is officially the Spanish opening or the real opus. And then here, when the black pieces go pawn a6, there is the exchange variation, which is when the bishop takes a knight. Now, when they take, the black pieces need to take back, and they typically take with a d pawn. But this is exactly what we call double tap pawns. As you can see, these two pawns are on the same file. And as you can see also, they typically get here, or actually I think they have to get here only after there's a trade of pieces. So you capture something, when the pawn captures back, then he gets in front of or behind whatever pawn was on that file. Double tap pawns, they have good things and bad things. For the most part, they're considered bad pawns to have, and you're going to see why. But I'm also going to show you the benefits of having double tap pawns. Sometimes they could be a good thing to have. But for the most part, I want you to look at it like something that you want to avoid. I myself enjoy more when I have my pawn structure healthy, so I try to stay away from double pawns. And this position from the real opus actually is going to show you the first problem with double tap pawns. In this position, the black pieces are okay with getting double tap pawns because they are happy to take the white piece's bishop. So they give up the Spanish bishop, and now the black pieces keep their two bishops, the white pieces have only one. And you're going to learn later on that the pair of bishops is something that we really want to keep. They're really powerful. So that's why we say the black pieces have compensation. And also, even though they have double tap pawns, they're not weak squares right now. Like this pawn is controlling this two, this pawn is controlling this two. So they have a solid position, and they also have their pair of bishops. However, they have to try to keep pieces on the board. If they get to the endgame, then these double tap pawns are going to become more of a liability for them. And let me tell you what I mean. If you look at the games of the famous Bobby Fischer, you can see that he used to play this line a lot. And one of his main continuations from this position, he used to do pawn to d4. And after pawn takes, he would be willing to take with the queen instead of the knight, because after queen takes and knight takes, there are no queens on the board. And this means we're quickly getting to the endgame. And the closer we get to the endgame, the worse it is to have these double tap pawns. Now, I'm not going to show you an entire game, but just for you to have an understanding. Right now, it's not horrible for the black pieces, but if we removed all of the pieces from the board, except for the kings and the pawns, you're going to see what I mean. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to remove all of these pieces. I'm going to keep the king here. Okay, so here we are. We get to this endgame, and of course, it's not going to be as easy as this. Like, there are going to be so many things going on. But if the game comes down to king and pawns, you're going to see how on the king side, we have what we call a pawn majority. And we have talked about this in other lessons. So we have 4 versus 3, which is going to allow us to create a passed pawn. And this is one of the pawns that we talked about in prior lessons. Now, if you look at the queen side, then the black pieces have the pawn majority. They have 1, 2, 3, 4 versus 1, 2, 3. However, since they have double tap pawns, they cannot create a passed pawn. It's like these two pawns are just ones. It's like if they have 3 versus 3. So here, let's say we activate the king like we know we have to do. And then I go here, let's say they just go king d6. Now, when I start pushing these pawns on the king side, you're going to see it's going to be easy for me to create a passed pawn. For the black pieces, not so much. Let's say they go c5, king e3, f6 maybe. I'm going to keep pushing my pawns, g4. Let's say they want to also expand on the queen side. I'm just going to go h4. Let's say they go king e6. Now here, I could, if I wanted, I don't have to do it right now, but if I wanted, I could just try to block these pawns already. So I could go b3, pawn g6, and now I could do a move like c4. So if they take and I take back, that's it. This pawn by itself could block these two because they are double tap pawns. If this pawn happened to be here so that they're not double tapped, then he could go b5, I take, he takes, and then he gets a pass pawn. But that's not the case because of the double tap pawns. Now, let's say they go something like a5. Well, maybe I could start working on creating a pass pawn already. So maybe I go g5. If I go g5, if he takes, well, I could just take back, and look, this is a pass pawn. If we remember, a pass pawn is a pawn that cannot be captured or blocked by one of his opponent's pawns. So that means this king will have to be tied up to the defense of the pass pawn. So if they went something like, I don't know, king d6, now my king is free to go around, go after this isolated pawn, and this king cannot come and defend because he needs to take care of my passed pawn. So this is the idea, guys, and many people don't talk about this much, but this is in essence what double tap pawns could create for you in the end game. Before we move on to the next position, I wanted you to appreciate how even though we're just in the opening, you already know what the end game might look like, and you might be able to come up with a plan to make this position look more like that end game that I just showed you. You can only think this far ahead when you understand this concept. I'm going to take you now to the next position and you're going to see double tap pawns in a different scenario. As you can see, this is a middle game position, and of course it's obvious that the black pieces are a little bit in trouble. All of the white pieces are all over the place. Look, we have 3 minor pieces in black's territory. They're really close to the king, so it's obvious that they're in trouble. But you're going to see how after the bishop takes on f6, they're forced to take with the pawn because the knight would take the queen if the queen took. So when they take, we're forcing them to get double tap pawns. Bishop takes is the best move, pawn takes, and now these double tap pawns are not only bad because they're weak and they're not controlling as many key squares, but now this pawn left the g file, making the king exposed. So it's going to be very easy for your queen to just come over with a check, the king moves, and then the knight and the queen can just do checkmate. And again, this was only possible because we were able to damage the black pieces' pawn structure. So they got double tap pawns and the king got exposed. Now we have a different position. It's black to move, and we have an opportunity to create double tap pawns for our opponent. So what could the black pieces do here to create double tap pawns for the white pieces? If you want, pause the video, see if you can find it. But the move that we're looking for here is actually bishop takes knight. So bishop takes knight, they're forced to take, and they get double tap pawns. And you can see again that double tap pawns are not as effective when it comes to protecting the king. There are many weaknesses just because we double tap those pawns. So whenever you can create such pawns, you could go ahead and create that liability for your opponent. Here we're back with another endgame. So we have the same amount of pawns, 3 versus 3. We have 1 minor piece each, but in this case, those double tap pawns are isolated double tap. So you already know what an isolated pawn is. Well, here we have double tap pawns who are isolated. There's no pawn on the files right next to them. So this means they're going to be really weak, and especially the one in front. That's going to be the easiest for us to attack. And you could see it now. If the white pieces just moved king c5, I have 2 pieces attacking that double tap pawns, and there's nothing the black pieces could do to protect it. If this pawn was on b7, that wouldn't be a double tap pawn. There's no weakness for me to put pressure on. So here you can also appreciate how bad double tap pawns could be. Finally, it's time to talk about the benefits of double tap pawns. So once you learn about this, it's not only going to help you create double tap pawns when you need them, but sometimes we get double tap pawns not because we planned them, and then we don't know what to do with them. So after this class, if you get a double tap pawn, you might maybe remember, okay, I know that when I get double tap pawns, they could offer these benefits. So maybe I could try to make that work. Anyways, in this position, it's very common to see the white pieces do a move like bishop e3. And bishop e3 is just putting pressure on this bishop, which is in a very good diagonal. But then we know that if they take, we have to retake with the pawn, and we get double tap pawns. Some of the good things about double tap pawns is that they offer more square control. So this pawn is now controlling these key squares, especially the one on d4. So this knight will never be able to get onto that square in our territory. So this pawn is helping us with that. Also, if we ever need to do d4, we have another pawn to protect. So let's say they did, just to show you, something like bishop d7, and I wanted to do d4. This is going to be perfect because they take and I take back with another pawn. and I have full control over the center. But then another thing about double tap pawns is that they offer you semi-open files. So since this pawn moved out of this file, we have a very active rook on the F file. In this case, the rook is perfect here, but if I didn't have it here, I'm thinking, okay, I got double tap pawn. It's not that bad because I get a semi-open file, so I might be able to bring my rook to the F file. Or in this case, maybe in the future, I double up my rooks. I bring the other rook also to the semi-open file, and then I put a lot of pressure on F7. So this is one of the benefits of having double tap pawns. Another position I wanted to show you comes out of this opening. This is called the London system. And just to show you, in some cases, the black pieces just don't like this bishop on this diagonal. So they try to trade it for their own dark square bishop. And here, you're gonna see many people just taking, which is fine. They could do 95. But I've seen people in positions like this where they go bishop g3. And the idea is that if the bishop takes, yes, we get double tap pawns because we have to take. But now this rook is open. So this rook is going to allow us to put more pressure on h7. Eventually I could bring my bishop to d3, and that could be something very powerful, especially if the black pieces are castled to the king side. So bishop d3, and as you can see, it's true that I got double tap pawns, but during the opening it's hard for my opponent to take advantage of it, and I'm benefiting from that semi-open file. The last position I wanted to show you is actually this one, where it's black to move, and the white pieces allowed the black pieces to take on c3. Now we're forced to take, and we're going to take with the b pawn to bring that pawn towards the center. And it's true that we get double tap pawns, but again, this offers me a very nice semi-open file. So let's say they go knight c6, my rook is going to come to the semi-open file to put pressure on b7. Now this is going to be really annoying for blacks because this bishop cannot leave right now, or we take on b7. Let's say they go here, well, we get a free pawn. And if, let's say, they did something like rook b8 to protect the pawn and then leave, well, now we have a tactic. We could do bishop c6 because the pawn is pinned. If he takes, then we take on b8. So it doesn't mean this is going to happen, but the moment I see I have a double tap pawn, I'm thinking, maybe I could put one of my rooks on that semi-open file. So this is it, guys. I really hope that you understand the concept of the double tap pawn, and we're going to, of course, talk way more about pawn structures in the future. But as of now, you have to have at least a basic understanding of what it is. And whenever you have the opportunity, try to create these weaknesses for your opponent, or just try to avoid them for yourself. So with that said, leave me any comments you might have, any questions, and I'll talk to you next time.